Hello, my name is David Brett. I'm the editor of the New Westminster Times. I have a question for you today. Have radical environmental activists been seeking for years to destabilize private property rights and basically overturn the free enterprise system that is alive in British Columbia? The answer is yes, and I'm going to back that up today in a way that some of you might find mind-blowing. Some of you will know some of this information already, but many of you, this will be new. So what I would like to do is read something. It is a statement by a well-known environmental activist. It's kind of a looking forward to how things could be or might be in the future. And I'm just going to read what this activist wrote. It is self-evident that the concept of private property is violently at odds with ecological reality. If we are to avoid despoilation of the planet, the rights of the individual to do what he wants on his own property will have to be sharply curtailed, or as one ecologist put it recently, quote, abhorrent as it may seem, free enterprise must be subordinated to ecological reality. And he went on, all industry will have to submit to government supervision on a scale which not even the communist countries at present attempt. Land speculation and development based purely on the profit motive will probably have passed out of history as thoroughly as the once, quote, respectable notion of slavery. Think about that. That's a very sharp and pointed statement about private property and free enterprise and how things are going to be shaped up in the future. So the question is, who is the activist that wrote this? And to explain who it is, I need to use a bit of a prop here to explain who said it and when they said it. I'm holding in my hands here a collector's edition, a souvenir edition of the Vancouver Sun, published on July 19th, 1971, on the 100th anniversary of the province of British Columbia. And before I tell you who made that statement, who the activist was, I would just like to say, does this cover of this mass media publication evoke a sense of white supremacy, colonialism, anti-Indigenous racism, or the erasure of Indigenous culture? I think not. So on the back cover, it's a congratulations to the province of BC celebrating 100 years. So here's the thing. The quote that was made was by none other than Vancouver Sun columnist and Greenpeace founder Bob Hunter. That's right. What he did is he wrote an article. It was called For the Future, A Revolution in Consciousness. This article is thoroughly mind-blowing. It was written in the same year that Greenpeace sailed into the North Pacific on the Phyllis McCormick to stop above-ground nuclear testing, just less than 2 months after he wrote this article. So what we see in this 1971 article is a template, if you will, a Magna Carta, a manifesto of environmental activism that is still alive today. It is the playbook that is to some degree controlling the media and controlling the narrative in our society, not just here in Vancouver or North America or the West, but the whole world. That's right. What was birthed here with Greenpeace has become a global movement and is shaping the world. Vancouver has played an incredible role. So let me read a couple of things that Bob Hunter wrote in this article that are very relevant to what's going on in our province right now with private property rights, DRIPA, the Cowichan case, the threats to private property rights in general. And I'll just read this one section. He says, this is 1971, perhaps the single most revolutionary thing which is going on right now is the, quote, revolution. That is, the concept of revolution is itself being revolutionized. The guy who runs through the street hurling grenades is as of much of a dinosaur as the Phil Gillardys of the world. You have to be of a certain age to remember who Phil Gillardy is. And he says, mind bombs at this stage are more effective weapons, and these are being delivered, hocus pocus, every minute of every hour of every day through the mass media. So think about this is the important part. Mind bombs at this stage are more effective weapons, and these are being delivered every day through the mass media. So at this point, I'd like to show you another book that is highly relevant to this discussion. I have in my hands here a book by Greenpeace co-founder Dr. Patrick Moore from Vancouver. I highly recommend everyone read this book because it gives you a glimpse into the early days of Greenpeace, the amazing stories. But not only that, how it was that a ragtag group of folks that were meeting in the basement of the Vancouver Unitarian Church exploded onto the world stage, and within a few short years had effectively killed off the testing of nuclear weapons above ground, the United States, France. And how did they do this? Well, what Patrick Moore describes in this book is sort of a playbook, a strategy, a communication strategy that caused Greenpeace to be a global organization raking in tens and hundreds of millions of dollars within a short time. So what Patrick Moore describes in this book is how that Bob Hunter's mind bomb strategy was woven into the whole Greenpeace strategy. What is a mind bomb? Well, it's described as a photo, a video, a film, some information, or a combination of the two that is transmitted through electronic means to a mass audience that spreads like wildfire. In the 70s, obviously there was no internet, but the concept of going viral was the key to the success of Greenpeace. It wasn't enough they got in a boat and went to the North Sea to stop the nukes. It was that story was communicated to the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and was read on the news. They went from a completely unknown organization in Vancouver to a globally known organization just like that. So what Greenpeace effectively did, and what activist organizations are currently still doing, is they're creating mind bombs. They're creating combinations of stories, videos, images, and pictures, distributing them through the mass media, and that the mass media has an appetite for it, and they're using that to control the narrative. So here we are, 55 years later, And activist organizations are still interested in pursuing the manifesto of Bob Hunter and Greenpeace. It is the same. Why would you mess with success? Greenpeace. Now, what happened with Dr. Patrick Moore is he left Greenpeace in the mid-'80s because he felt it had become taken over with sort of an extremist element that was more interested in anti-capitalism, anti-corporatism than it was in science. He had a PhD in ecology. There weren't that very many scientists involved in Greenpeace. So, the mind bombs. What is a mind bomb that we can think of that took place in 2021? In Kamloops, they held a press conference. They had scientists. They had pictures, a PowerPoint presentation. They had an authority figure, a guru, if you will, talking about something that was mind bomb material. It was the description or the conjuring of a mass grave filled with children. Instantaneously, the global media picked up the story and the mind bomb exploded. It's textbook environmental activism. The narrative now is, well, Indigenous people are screaming for land back. It's all about land back. Well, where did this land back activism come from? It did not, in my opinion, spring out from nowhere. What is happening is that environmental activists, I believe, are using, to some degree, First Nations to achieve their ultimate goal of removing private property and private industry as something that is achievable. The vision is to see the human species as a parasite on the earth and to create this kind of religiosity around it. So I will read one more to kind of drive the point home. I'll read from the book something that Patrick Moore quotes Bob Hunter, the respected journalist from the Vancouver Sun. He says, when they're discussing the success they'd had with stopping the bomb, and they're working on their Save the Whales project, they're out on a boat in the sea, he says, there's a very good chance it will become a kind of eco-fascism. Not everyone can get a PhD in ecology. The only way to change the behavior of the masses is to create a popular mythology, a religion of the environment, where people simply have faith in the gurus. Talk about prophetic. And talk about intentional. That's the intention, that's the playbook, that's the plan that we're seeing here in 2026. It's no different. We have these kind of deified holy figures like, let's say, David Suzuki. He's a guru. These are the people you have to trust. Not everyone understands the complexities of ecology and science. And he says, he admits it. This has become a form of eco-fascism that is controlling the narrative, and the general public and the media have played along. Now, in the beginning, behind me, I'm standing near Fisherman's Wharf in Vancouver, and I'm here for a reason. The various vessels of the Greenpeace movement, the Rainbow Warrior, the Phyllis McCormack, these iconic ships would sometimes come into port here and would leave an indelible mark, not only on Vancouver, but on the world. Patrick Moore, in his book, describes Bob Hunter as shaping the consciousness of the whole world, using his near genius ability to use the media to communicate his message using mind bombs. So here we are, 2026. All of the environmental activism employs these simple techniques. You get some film footage. You put scary music to it. You get someone crying on screen. You mix that with some information, and then you float that into the media. Now it's social media. And these images, these mind bombs, if you will, the constant appealing to religiosity and spirituality is playing on the public's conscience and, frankly, winning the day. The eco-fascist industrial complex, if you want to call that, is controlling the narrative. We've just had the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, meet with coastal First Nations. Well, what is coastal First Nations? It's now coming out, and many people are reporting on this, that it's an NGO. It's a nonprofit organization. It is simply using the Greenpeace Bob Hunter playbook. And there's one thing that I'd like to read to you in closing. Dr. Patrick Moore vectors into British Columbia politics in a very interesting way. The Conservative Party of BC was effectively birthed because of a retweet of Patrick Moore by John Rustad. Patrick Moore has now been labeled as a climate denialist, and it was so anathema to, I guess it was then Premier or leader Kevin Falk, and they booted him out of the party, and that springboarded the whole. So this Dr. Patrick Moore has a lot of very incredible insights, and one of the things he says often is that environmentalism has become anti-human. It is not pro-humanity. It seeks to reduce humanity. And I would like to read you something that from the 1971 essay by Bob Hunter that kind of confirms this. And it has to do with what he at the time thought was going to be overpopulation. He says, central to all this is the assumption that the birth rate will have to be checked. For if it is not checked, there is no hope for us. We may stave off social collapse and barbarism for a time, but the point will soon or later pass where, even with all our technology, we can no longer maintain ourselves on this small planet. Therefore, whether the arrangement involves self-regulation, voluntary birth control practices, or government regulation, bracket, enforced by anti-pregnancy serums, within a century, we will have come to the point where childbearing will be tightly controlled. Large families will be looked upon with repugnance and probably will be forbidden by law. Think about that. This is part of the environmental psychology, part of the manifesto, that entertaining forced sterilization should be considered to save the planet. Well, as we now know, the population explosion has not caused mass starvation or these predictions of doom that were thrown around at that time have not come to pass. So I'll leave you with this thought. One of the most significant ideas that has come to dominate world politics, world policy, the United Nations, every nation on earth, is the concept of climate change, the concept of environmental responsibility, the concept of sustainability. Well, where did all those ideas come from? Did they come from Los Angeles or London or Paris or somewhere in Germany or Europe? No, it came from right here in Vancouver. We can take credit or blame for it. But here's something possibly hopeful. As British Columbians are now bearing the brunt of this insecurity and this sort of very radical attack on our way of life by radical environmentalists, if anyone can put the genie back in a bottle, it's people from right here. We understand what's at stake. All of this eco-fascism came from right here. The key is to understand that it happened and that it is still happening, and we shouldn't be fighting with First Nations people. We should understand that all of this is playing out against a much larger agenda that I think I have somewhat proven comes straight from the founding of Greenpeace and is playing out in every environmental activistic organization around the world, starting here. So thanks for watching. My name is David Brett. I'm the editor of the New Westminster Times. If you like what we're doing, you can support us. You can go to our website, newwesttimes.com. Up in the right-hand corner, there's a button that says support our work. If you would be so inclined, we would greatly appreciate it. We do have costs, and we do want to continue what we're doing. And any kind of support or encouragement we receive, or communication, many of you have sent me emails and of encouragement, and that is greatly appreciated. So my name is David Brett. Thanks for watching today. All the best.